Welcome to Rebels with a Heart, the new rules of leadership. Today's topic is conscious capitalism, business as a force for good. We are joined by two fellow leaders, fellow rebels, fellow conscious capitalists Michael Gelb and JeVon McCormick. Excited for you both to be here. We also had our third panelist, Karen Salmon, who had a weather incident. She wasn't able to join us today, but we wish her much wellness and safety and all the best. So, gentlemen, I'd like to pass the microphone to you to introduce yourselves and your work and your backgrounds and your passions to our audience, then we'll jump into a spirited conversation. Thanks for joining us.
My name is JeVon McCormick. I'm the president and CEO of Scribe Media. And gosh, how do you introduce yourself? We are a publishing company. We help writers write, market, and publish their books. Some of the bigger names we've worked with, David Goggins, who did Can't Hurt Me. We've worked with Nassim Taleb, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, Tiffany Haddish, just a few. The majority of our authors, though, are CEOs, business owners, coaches that are looking to write their book for lead generation, credibility, things of that nature. On a personal note, the things that I enjoy the most, my family. I live by 5 principles: God, health, family, business, and investing. If it doesn't fall in those 5, I don't do it. It's on you, Michael.
Thanks, JeVon. Welcome.
So I just saw on the chat one of my old friends from New Mexico. So delighted. It's so cool to connect in unexpected ways. And yeah, I guess connection is the key word I would share in describing myself. I actually wrote a book called The Art of Connection, and it's the secret of life, feeling connected to others, connected to life, connected to a sense of meaning and purpose. I feel like that's why I love LifeGuides, connecting to people who have life challenges, helping to support them, but being part of, I mean, there's 2 ways to look at life and look at the world. We're all separate. It's every being for themselves. Dog eat dog, rat eat rat. And of course, we all know at the end of the rat race, you're still a rat. And then there's another way to look at the world, which has always been the wisdom underlying every great tradition all over the planet, that we're all connected, that we're all one, that, as Leonardo da Vinci said, everything connects to everything else. So I'm fascinated by and a student of and constantly exploring how do we enrich, refine, develop, cultivate that sense, that experience of connection, also known as love.
That was an amazing introduction, Michael, and it was unique of every other guest we've ever had in terms of the pace and just the level of presence you brought to that. So thank you. And I just want to say, I'm honored and humbled that both of you gentlemen here today, because you both played, whether you realize it or not, a very influential role in my own journey as a conscious capitalist and as a leader. Michael, we've gotten to know each other quite well. And you as a teacher and a mentor of mine. And JeVon, although we've not known each other that long, our conversations have been very, very deep and really touched me in a real way, that I've infused that leadership and lessons you've shared into my own business practices. So I'm excited that you're both here today to talk about this topic and just share your humility, your genius, your giftedness with the world and with the people that we're serving through LifeGuides. And again, what LifeGuides is, for those who are joining us on the call, is a platform that connects people who have been through a life experience or challenge with others who are going through the same, so they can receive peer-to-peer support, mentorship, growth, and love, as Michael said, to work through those experiences that ultimately contribute to happier, healthier organizations, communities, and healing the world, frankly. And that's a big mission. That's what we're doing here. And so Rebels with a Heart has become a platform that which we can highlight amazing heart-centered leaders and rebels who are rewriting the rules of business and leadership and consciousness and how we do that. And JeVon, I think you are exemplar of that. And Michael, obviously, you're a teacher of that, both in the globe and also for me personally. So again, welcome, guys. And I think I'll start with the first question. What is what does conscious capitalism mean to you, not just from an organizational standpoint, from a concept, and why is it personal for you?
Michael?
Sure. Well, it's personal for me because it was what I was doing from the beginning of my career, kind of being drawn through luck in some ways, through happenstance. You could say, well, when I first moved to Washington, D.C., my first thought was, this is back in 1982, I wanted to teach creative thinking and innovative leadership to people in government. And we've all seen how that worked out. They weren't really very receptive, which disappointed me. I was so idealistic. And I also attempted to make inroads into the world of education, but there was so much bureaucracy. And much to my surprise, the people who are interested in what I had to share about how to develop creativity and innovation and leadership were business leaders. And they began to engage me to help them build organizational cultures that supported human flourishing. And it was such an amazing opportunity because these were visionary, humanistic rebels with a heart. These were people who are not just out of the standard mold of a CEO. They were great people. Many of them became lifelong friends. And I was in my 20s and they gave me this opportunity to share my work, and it resonated. And so I felt, wow, what if we get the people with the most money and power, business, to be more conscious, to be more creative, to be more compassionate? Isn't that might be the best way to make a difference in the world? And for a long time, I was kind of doing that. I thought I was doing it kind of on my own. I mean, I occasionally go to some gathering of people who are doing, they called it organizational transformation, and other groups of people who had a similar notion. So there were loose formations of various like-minded people, and we exchanged information. Then in the 1990s, I was invited to teach at George Mason University at an executive MBA program, and the director of that program was a Professor Raj Sisodia, who was an engineer and marketing professor, as well as the head of the program. And we really clicked. I did a whole series of seminars there. So a few years later, he sent me the manuscript of this book called Firms of Endearment. And I thought, wow, here is the grounded business case that shows that my idealistic notion that if you treat all stakeholders with care and dignity as essential parts of your enterprise, including the environment, including employees, including customers, including vendors, that you will flourish, you will do better. You will not only be happier, but you'll make more money. And then this became something called conscious capitalism. And then I was invited to facilitate a few of the first CEO summits and to speak. I think I've spoken at 5 of the summits, the global summits for conscious capitalism. And all of a sudden, here was this brilliantly worked out framework with a lot of research and data behind it for what was always my sense of what we all ought to be doing. So now we're all doing it.
Awesome. Thanks. Great, Michael. Thank you for sharing that journey and that story. JeVon, I want to come back to you and hear your path and your reflections on that question of what is conscious capitalism to you and that personal connection.
Wow. So conscious capitalism to me, and Derek, you know the background, but I'll set the tone a little bit. In the communities that I came from, no one knew of capitalism. You know, short version, my dad was a black pimp and drug dealer in the 1970s. He had prostitutes. My mother was raised in an orphanage. I don't know where my last name comes from. I was in and out of juvenile 3 different times as a kid. I've got a GED. I don't have a college degree. So, you know, my path of growing up was rapper, athlete, drug dealer. And, you know, I sucked at all 3. So I didn't have a lot of options. And so, but no one told me about capitalism. No one told me about entrepreneurship. And so for me, it became very important for me that I learned what capitalism is. And we live in a country now where we've demonized capitalism, but capitalism has literally given me the life that I have. And so for me, I have found it very important to give back to those communities that I come from, because it's just a matter of not knowing. You know, if we're sitting here right now and none of us know how to do brain surgery, that doesn't make us wrong, doesn't make us right. If we don't know how to launch a rocket, doesn't make us wrong, doesn't make us right. We just don't know. Unfortunately, in the communities that I come from, there's just a lot that we don't know. And so I have found, for me, conscious capitalism, my version is to go back and teach the power of capitalism to the communities that I come from. You know, right now in our society, we preach education is the key. Education is the key. You constantly hear education is the key. But what so many people are missing is, if I don't have the tools to get an education, you're on step 2. I was that kid that sat in class, and when the teacher said, who needs a pencil? I had to raise my hand. Who needs a piece of paper? I had to raise my hand. So yeah, education may be the key, but we also have to realize you have to have the tools to get the education. And that starts in those lower economic communities so they can understand the power of capitalism and that we can stop demonizing it. Because I promise you, if they understand the power of it, many people will take hold of it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to say, I mean, I think you embodied that so well. I mean, it oozes off you, JeVon, when we've spoken in the past when we met. I mean, your bias for action, your ability and willingness to just jump in and do something about it and apply yourself and to bring others along with you. That's been evident to me from the very first time we met. And you're just an amazing example of resilience and your willingness to ask for support and to bring resources together and to work, you know, with what you were given and turn into something amazing. Right? You've turned your life into a masterpiece from my perspective and from what you're doing and how you're now serving others. And I think that's incredible. And I just want to acknowledge that. And I mean, you are a rebel with a heart, truly. And so, and I want to just say that so you know that. And I think even in your leadership, I mean, like one of the things that I'll just say very tangibly, like it's something simple, but I remember our last conversation that we talked about how on your website, you designed your team, your chart of people at the executive team, and the board is at the bottom, right? They're the people holding the foundation, and you move up. They're the scaffolding for the entire team. And that's something that we've applied here at LifeGuides, something that we recognize. It's just, we're holding the framework and the foundation to build up and to build healthier and to build stronger. And even something as small as that is something that, you know, a year and a half later has stuck with me. And I think is something that other leaders and companies could benefit from hearing. It's that sense of humility and the fact that you put people first, you put your team first, you put your stakeholders first, and you also recognize how to apply yourself in that design as well. So just want to give you that credit.
I appreciate that. It's to your point. I've said this to you, Derek. And many people may disagree. My opinion, that's kind of the great thing in life, is CEOs, in my opinion, they're a bit overrated. And I say that as a CEO, you know, we don't actually do the work. You know, yeah, we make some decisions, you set some direction, you carry a lot of responsibility. But at the end of the day, you are the support system, the foundation for the organization. And to your point, if you're coming to the website and you're looking for me, I want you to see all the people who are actually doing the work long before you make it down to me. My role is to support and serve the organization. No one works for me, people work with me. And that's the way the culture has been set up. I'm no one's boss. I've got 3 letters after my name. And I make the joke, long before I was the CEO, I already had 3 letters after my name at GED. So, you know, it's just three different letters. That's all.
That's incredible. So kind of talking about it even a bigger level, I mean, we're just broadening that impact, this idea of business as a force for good. When you think about how you're applying yourself to those causes and how you're using your platform, what is that, how are you doing that in your work now? And JT or JeVon, I know the answer to some of that, but I'd love to hear you share with the audience. And Michael, obviously, I mean, I think you have a lot that you can share on this question. So either one of you can take that.
Michael, you want me to jump first at that one?
Yeah, please.
So, Derek, you know this, I keep it simple. People, process, profits, and as a bonus with those profits, you can do great things for the communities that you live in, the communities that you serve, the communities of which your businesses are based in. But I keep it very simple. Put people first. In all things that we do, we put people first. And so many people have asked me, well, where did you get that mentality? Growing up mixed race, my dad was Black and my mom's white. Derek, you know this, you know, Black people didn't like me because I was half white. White people didn't like me because I was half Black. And so I always had a problem fitting in, but I learned, okay, everyone's not going to like me. So I'm not going to spend my time trying to make everyone like me. But what it did teach me is growing up mixed race, I was often treated second class. Growing up with a single mom, I was treated second class. Growing up on welfare, second class. And it showed me, you know what? People should be put first regardless of their race, regardless of their sexuality, regardless of their religion. And I make it real simple for people. I said, think of it this way. You have religion. You have Lutheran, Methodist, Catholic, Muslim, whatever. You pick the religion. Am I going to be that arrogant that I'm going to tell you which one is actually right and which one is actually wrong? No, it's people. Put people first. You heard me say this earlier, regardless if you are a religious person or you believe in God, just listen to this and I'll shut up. The commandment says, love thy neighbor. And it says, and this is the most important commandment. Now pay attention. It didn't say love thy neighbor, but not if they're mixed race. It didn't say love thy neighbor, but not if they're gay. So I've just looked at people and I put people first. How can I serve people? How can I do right by people? And so much of that just comes from my upbringing. But I will always start with people. If you give me great people, we can build great process and we can make great profits and therefore do great things for the communities that we live and serve.
Yeah. Thank you, JeVon. Michael, you want to chime in on that question?
Sure. Well, JeVon just used the phrase great prophets, and you were referring to the wisdom of the great prophets.
Love it. I mean, it hurts me to say nonprofit. I just want you to know that. That hurts.
That's the thing. I mean, I think nonprofit is an outdated way of thinking.
Yeah.
Way of thinking. And what's hilarious is, I mean, in my career, I've worked with many nonprofits, and my challenge has always been to get them to think more like a profit-oriented enterprise. And in the early days, my job was to get profit-oriented companies to think more like nonprofits. But what conscious capitalism does is bring together the best of those two modalities. I want to come back to your reference to love thy neighbor, and what I think is the essential statement of certainly of Judeo-Christian religion, but I think it really I think it applies certainly in my understanding from my study of Sufism, from my study of Hinduism, Buddhism, and other traditions, more shamanic traditions that have arisen from people in the Americas, in Australia, in Latin America, really everywhere, in Africa, everywhere. But it's summed up in a Judeo-Christian phrase, and it is, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, and all thy might. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And people often think of those as two separate points, but the real point is that they're the same. They're the same. So the way you express your love of the divine is by loving people and putting people first. So this is Ramana Maharshi, one of the great sages just ever. And what's great, you can read his book. It's called Who Am I? It might be the wisest book I've ever read. And look how easy it is to read.
Man, that book was made for a person with a GED. That's my kind of book.
All you really have to do is look at the picture. This tells you everything you need to know as he asked this question. But one of his disciples once came up to him and said, how shall we treat others? And he responded, there are no others. Now, it's one thing to talk about that. It's another thing to operate like that and have that in your heart. And I have as much ego issues and me, and blah, blah, blah stuff. I by no means have any pretense of being evolved. The more I learn, the more humbling it is. The good thing is I can see that being open to and deepening our understanding of the ways in which we're all connected is the way to practice the truly good life, a life of deeper meaning and purpose. And then we each have different ways that we can follow that path, and different ways we can express that path. And the big thing of what I love about conscious capitalism is it's a very well thought out approach to leveraging the most powerful force in our world. Certainly, look, in the United States, business is 80% of the economy. Government plus nonprofits, 20% of the economy. So business is 80%. That's where most of the money, power, the energy is. And what if we all embrace conscious capitalism? Yeah. What if, and this, by the way, I'm not just talking about this theoretically or whatever. These are the companies that I work with. I work with this phenomenal company based in New Jersey called Hillman Consulting. They've attended the conscious capitalism summits and are a living example of, they were a good company to start with before they got involved in conscious capitalism, but it gave them a playbook. It gave them, it also gives, by the way, it's really helpful to know that you're not the only one who's trying to do this. And so it's there's nothing greater than the power of an idea and an ideal whose time has come. And this is the time for conscious capitalism. This is the time for the healing organization. This is the time where we must put people first, not because it's nice to do, not because it just feels good to do, but because we must do it, because Mother Earth is crying out for us to do it. Suffering people who've suffered unjustly and unfairly, people who've been wounded and exploited and hurt because they're different, must be cared for and included along with everybody else, not to the exclusion of anybody who may have previously had it easier, because that just creates more divisiveness. We're just all in this together, and we have this potent vehicle for applying this philosophy in a way that makes everybody more money. And that's why it can really work.
Yeah. Michael, I love your idealism and I love your heart in this as well. And I want to acknowledge that too. It's just, again, you're such a wise teacher for all of us. And I want to come back to something JeVon said earlier when we first started it. You know, there's a narrative that's demonizing literally capitalism right now, right? That to your point, it's undermining the progress that we can make. And part of that is due to the fact that, you know, the traditional model of capitalism that we've been raised in over the last century is about shareholder value, is about profit maximization, or at least it's moved that way in the last 30 years, especially in the management consulting era, right? And so as we look to use your word, Michael, to heal the culture of business, and JeVon, I asked this as kind of as a practical, tactical question, how do we get more leaders, more businesses, more people enrolled in the thinking and the heart connection with shifting and making this an obvious choice for success and for healing and for love and for purpose and for growth in a way that sustains us and rejuvenates us and is embraced as opposed to rejected and vilified and perceived as something wrong. And I think that's a responsibility that I personally take very seriously. And I'd love your thoughts on that.
You know, the big one for me is you see this a lot right now. You know, we want to demonize the person that's made a lot of money. We want to demonize the person, the companies that are highly profitable. Here's what I have found interesting is when nonprofits need money, want money, where do they go? They go to the capitalists and they ask for money. When the government wants more tax money, where do they go? They go to the capitalists for more money. So I'm like, why demonize the people that you go to for the money? Now, there's a big responsibility on the people that make the money. And that's where, in my opinion, the shift comes from. It's nothing wrong with being profitable. I love profit. You heard me say it earlier. It hurts me to say nonprofit. Profit is great. It's what do you do with the profits? That's the key. I'll give you a great example of our organization internally. I read an article that said 45% of Americans don't have a spare $400 cash in case of an emergency. And when I read that, it hit home because I was raised like that with my mom. My mom never had spare cash for anything. I knew what it was like to go to bed on Friday afternoon because I had my free government lunch Friday and I didn't eat again until Monday when I got my free government lunch again. My mom never had a spare $400. Well, that hit home for me. So I said to myself, okay, we're a profitable company. What can we do different? And so we put an emergency fund in place to where if anyone ever has an emergency, they can borrow $1,500, no questions asked, interest-free, on the spot, because in my opinion, no one should have to drive around, walk around, constantly worried, oh my God, what if the shoe drops? What if this happens? And it was something very small that we could put in place. And it's that safety net of putting people first, understanding the dynamics of America that, you know, we say we're, and I say this respectfully, we say we're all in this together, and we are, but while we're in it together, we actually don't have the same set of circumstances together. There's a big difference between now I live in a gated community, but I didn't grow up that way. And so there's a massive difference that we have to recognize in that. So I don't think there's a problem with being just massively profitable. But what is it that you do with the profits is really the question that needs to be answered and shown to everybody. You know, you can only buy so many jets. You can only store so much money over in Ireland. What are you going to do with those profits for the greater good of the communities? Last piece on this, Derek, and I'll pick on our very own John Mackey. It's not picking on him. I just use it as an example. So in the lower economic communities, they know all too well what a food desert is. A food desert is a community that does not have a store that people can walk to, and they don't have access to food, a grocery store. Here's the problem. Those same communities have no clue what organic food is. Right. So my thought has always been this. Think about this. We always argue about corporate tax breaks. Here's who I would like to get a massive corporate tax break. Let's say Whole Foods sends a store down to the lower economic communities. We all know it's not going to be as profitable as the store out by my house. Great, I understand that. But here's what you do. Now this community has access to food. They know what organic food is. And more importantly, you're going to change generational poverty. And here's how. When I can see that my mother or father goes to work each day, and I have an example to show me what's possible, now I know that I can go to work each day and have a job and have benefits in a 401k. But if I never get to see that, what do we think is going to happen with generational poverty? It's the same thing over and over and over. So yes, that Whole Foods location may not be as profitable, but damn it, they deserve a massive tax break because what they're doing is literally changing generational poverty, providing opportunities to people, and showing people, okay, organic food. It's a damn shame that we have more liquor stores in lower economic communities than we actually have grocery stores. So there's my 3 cents.
Thank you. Michael, do you have anything you want to add to that thought before I kind of continue on this path?
Please continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I agree with everything you said, JeVon. And I think the other piece that, and I pondered this question often, right? Obviously, as a capitalist, we want to build wealth, we want to create success, we want to take care of our families. How do we, and back to your question about, and this is the first time we've ever had scripture quoted in a rebel session, just for clarity for both of you guys. But
you said I was a rebel.
I love it. I love it. It's great. So I love it. So where is the line though? Like, how do we know as capitalists, as business leaders, where the line between enough, quote unquote, and where we need to be then reinvesting that into those communities? Because we as people get lost, right? It's human nature to want to, or at least it has been, to hoard and maintain resources, because we lived in a time where there wasn't an abundance of resources. Now we do, in many parts of the world, have that abundance. But to your point, there are parts of this country down the street that are having that same level of lack. And this is generally a question that I ponder, where's the line that as executives, CEOs, and conscious leaders, we know it's time to put more in, and it's time to call our friends to put more in. Because to your point, you and I both, we all have friends that have jets. We all have friends that have car collections, and good on them. They've earned them. And I have no fault in that. But at the same time, what could we do more with that money to raise the standard of people? Could we make more so everyone can be a have, and there's have more standards, right? I mean, how do we correct that? And I'm not asking for policy, because I think that's not the answer.
Right.
What's the real solution? And this is why I love the organization of conscious capitalism, because I think you have real people thinking about this. So anyway, that's a question either one of you can take.
You want to run with that, Michael?
Sure. So this has been, people have been asking about this in the chat too, so glad we're addressing it. It matters how you make the money. It matters it's not just what do you do with the profits. The old model, I live near the Rockefeller Preserve. This whole area was endowed to the state of New York by the Rockefeller family, who were vying with Andrew Carnegie to be the richest in the world. So the Rockefellers endowed this amazing parkland all over here along the Hudson River. And right down the road over there is the cemetery where Carnegie is buried. So it's great to reflect on this when we walk through there. Carnegie had a dictum, which is the mindset that unfortunately still dominates many of the well-intentioned capitalists. Carnegie's dictum was, in the first third of your life, get as much education as you can. In the next third of your life, make as much money as you can. In the final third of your life, give away as much as you can. And we can't argue that Rockefeller and Carnegie have left tremendous endowments that have brought forth libraries, hospitals, universities, aid to disenfranchised people, global programs of food, water. It's just amazing. Diseases have been remediated thanks to their legacy. However, they also caused untold suffering to the people who worked for them, to their communities, and to the planet. So that's part of an old model that we can't afford anymore. The new model, or a step in the direction of the new model, is the Giving Pledge, which was started by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. They pledged to give more than half of their fortunes to philanthropy, to helping, and they spent a lot of time, Bill Gates spent a lot of time and effort focusing on the most effective way to give. So there's been tremendous evolution in the last 30 years on targeted, intelligent, leveraged giving so that every penny goes to a systems approach to helping as many people as possible and changing fundamental conditions, and not just giving money to feel good. So since they started the Giving Pledge, they've recruited, I believe it's now 204 billionaire families around the world who pledged to give half or more of their vast fortunes to help others. So that's a movement in the right direction, but it still doesn't address this principle that Raj and I emphasize very strongly. It's one of the central themes of our book, The Healing Organization, that it matters how you make the money. So the good news is enterprises that meet legitimate human needs, not those that create addiction and capitalize on people's weaknesses, but enterprises that meet legitimate human needs, treat their stakeholders well, treat the environment as a stakeholder. So that, in other words, like I mentioned, Hillman Consulting, my client, what do? They remediate mold and asbestos. They do air quality analysis. They help create safer workplaces. So the way they make money is by meeting real human needs. So, if you have mold, if you have asbestos, if you have an air problem in your building, they're your savior. You love these people. They're coming and solving a practical problem. Look, Whole Foods, it's been through ups and downs and challenges, but it's made healthy food, organic food, food that is produced with minimum cruelty and optimal stewardship of the environment. It's made that so much more accessible. And even more than that, it's helped to change consciousness about food as part of a system of overall health and well-being in society. So if you think about most people who think, gee, I want to go to business school and I like the idea of business, and they're pro-capitalism, they think, wow, it'd be great to work for a big company and learn all about business. They don't go into a business thinking, a particular bank, for example, that has paid billions of dollars of fines for creating false accounts and trading commissions. I don't think anybody, except perhaps one or two people we can think of, but I don't know anybody who at the beginning of their career thinks, gee, I want to be part of a mechanism that exploits others for my own self-aggrandizement. Rather, the incentives and the mindset around old capitalism are such that it often brings out the worst in people. The fabulous thing about conscious capitalism is it's designed to bring out the best in people. A lot of us, if you ever watch The Godfather or The Sopranos, they're always saying, oh, it's not personal, it's just business. Like, oh, it's okay in business to murder other people and to steal from them and extort from them. Well, guess what? It's not okay. So business is always personal. It's always human. And if we think about it intelligently, and by the way, part of this is, there's fixed thinking on both extremes of our political spectrum. In the extreme left, when it's hard to even talk about the healing organization, conscious capitalism. They're just so sure that all business is evil and has to be shut down, and that you have to be very skilled to try to get around that and have a real dialogue. And you take people from the extreme right, and business doing good, that sounds like communism to me. And you have to be very skillful to try to find common ground with those folks too. And I've had some very challenging and interesting conversations with people from both sides of that particular spectrum. Having said that, I think most people, if they stop and think about it, if they think about their favorite companies, if they think about who treats them really well as a customer, if they think about who stands behind their products, if they think about who's showing up in their community. Take HEB in Texas. I mean, by the way, Charles, the Butt family that started HEB, they're in the Giving Pledge. They're worth $10 billion, and they pledged to give at least $5 billion philanthropically. But they make money in a way people love. People love working there. People love shopping there. They're in Texas, they're in Mexico, they're expanding out. And next time there's a hurricane, next time there's a natural disaster, next time it's freezing in Texas and water pipes are bursting and people can't get access to shelter, to food, to clean water, guess who arrives first with trucks filled with clean water and teams to clean out your neighborhood and help you? It's HEB, a private company that has created this amazing task force to help people in crisis. So when HEB shows up in your community, you have it to help you in your time of need and help your neighbor who's in even worse trouble than you are. You develop a love and a bonding for that company, and you want to go out of your way to shop there. You want to buy all your groceries there. And that's why they're so profitable, because people love them, because they live higher values. And when I talk about higher values, somebody posted in the chat before, how do you behave when no one's looking? Mm-hmm. That's what your values are. That's the first thing that we do when I work with a company is go deep to help them understand what are their real core values. What are they pledged to, and that they wouldn't change no matter what the circumstances were. And what's their higher purpose beyond just making money? Because look, we have this wonderful dog. He's now 11 years old. And a lot of times he just hangs out and breathes. He just breathes. And my wife and I look at him, we love him so much, and we look at him and say, it looks like the purpose of his life is just breathing. He's just there to breathe. But of course, the purpose of his life is love. He's just filled with love. We love him. My wife just is ecstatically in love with him. He's ecstatically in love with her. And I'm ecstatically in love with watching the dynamic between my wife and Sumo, our dog. So if we say, what's the purpose of business? Unfortunately, most people would say, make money. But no, it's not. The purpose of business is to alleviate suffering and elevate joy, to meet real human needs in ways that generate abundance. That's the purpose of business. Profit and money is like oxygen. You can't breathe without it. So yes, you must find a way to be profitable, but you must do so within a framework of values, within a framework of a higher purpose, by putting people first and never, ever depart from that. Which doesn't mean, by the way, that you don't have to make tough decisions. You're not running one of my client had to let people go at the beginning of COVID. They lost a huge amount of their business, but they brought them all back as soon as they could, and they took care of their emergency needs in the meantime. And they called people and reached out to them. So it doesn't mean, I'm not saying business needs to become a charity. Business needs to become a nonprofit. No, this is a new model of business. It's evolved, even though it goes back to the formation of capitalism. Adam Smith, we all know about The Wealth of Nations, but he also wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And we need to bring these two together. That's what conscious capitalism does. It brings together the real heart of capitalism as well as the genius strategy behind capitalism, which, by the way, even unconscious capitalism has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of extreme poverty and is continuing to do so. The problem is it's also destroying the earth, and we're out of margin for error. So that's why there's an urgency to talk about conscious capitalism, about the healing organization, and other, the B Corp movement, where there's future capital. There are many other groups and elements within this bigger movement that are formed up naturally and spontaneously. Because, as I said before, this is the idea whose time is now. And the question we all have to ask ourselves is, how do we get more engaged? How do we be part of the proverbial solution?
Thank you, Michael. That was incredible answer and invitation as well. JeVon, anything you'd like to add to that, from your perspective? I watched your wheels turning, so.
It's what was interesting is Michael brought up two of my favorite people that I've studied, which was Rockefeller, Carnegie, but also in that era that is highly overlooked that people don't talk about was George Westinghouse. And George Westinghouse was someone whose the employees who worked for him, unlike Ford, unlike Carnegie, unlike Rockefeller, the employees that worked with him never went on strike. When he passed away, the employees got together, pulled their money, and built a statue for him. He was credited as the godfather of the weekend. Carnegie's team, the employees that work for Carnegie, they got one day off a year. And most people think it was Christmas. No, it was July 4th. And so George Westinghouse was doing things back then that so many people now credit Google with, where, having a doctor on site, a nurse on site, a dentist on site, being able to take parts of your check and lease a home or buy a new. George Westinghouse was doing that back in that same era as those gentlemen that Michael brought up. And not only that, where he had also put people first, was many people don't realize that if you work for Edison, every patent that you created, Edison took credit for. If you worked with George Westinghouse, you took credit for your patents. And he always put people first. He didn't need to take the credit. And I've deeply studied, obviously, George Westinghouse because I appreciate the way he did it. A big fly on the wall as well, and Michael brought it up. In the country now, I still love this country, greatest country in the world. I will always say that. We have our flaws, we have our shortcomings. But someone put a post up there that said that they talked about food deserts. And
I was going to ask that question. I'll read it to you right now because I was going to go with that. We'll use that as the final question, JeVon, if you want to do that. That's right.
It's what's sad about that is we live in a country right now where many people don't want to speak the truth. I am in the incredibly blessed position. I believe the Lord put me here for a reason. Many people don't even realize that I wasn't even allowed to be born in this country until 1967. It was illegal for mixed race to be together until 1967. So when I speak on again, I've been called white boy by a black person, but I've never had a white person call me white boy. And so the race in our country right now, yeah, is it there? Is it evident? Do we have a problem with it? Is there the left? Is there the right? Yeah, all of that is true. But certain things we do have to call out and call them what they are. It's not racist to bring up a food desert for lower income communities. But we don't want to always speak the truth and call what things are because we want to label it racist. We want to attack a certain community. Just like this, I was in a group of CEOs. There were 50 of us. And I was the only person of color in the room. And I asked, I said, can I get an honest opinion here? Honest answer. I said, if I say welfare in low economic communities, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And one gentleman, white guy, and I had so much respect for him, he said, minorities. And I said, but what if I told you that there are more white people on welfare than black and brown combined? And he goes, no. I go, yeah, that's the truth. And he's like, wow. So a lot of times this comes down to just, again, we don't know what we don't know. And there's a better way to do this. I'm not looking to fight battles of who's right, who's wrong. Michael's a white guy, and now he's the enemy. It's just why. I have no desire to go down that path. I'm more interested in how do we right our wrongs. Yeah, we did some things wrong. We did a lot of things wrong. Still doing some things wrong, but I also have to call out what those things are and how do we fix them? How do we move forward? And I'll stand by this. Capitalism, in my opinion, is the key. And yes, there's truth behind, okay, how do you make the money? I agree with that. There's a lot of truth behind that, especially think about it. My dad was a pimp. I drove around with my dad and collected money from prostitutes. I'm well aware of it's all about how you make your money, and there's a better way to do it. But I don't look to attack groups of people. I look to how do we solve the problem.
Well, just thank you so much. Just so enriching and marvelous. Really deeply appreciate it. And I want to talk a little bit about Grayston Bakery. Just as a phenomenal, because I think part of what we need to do is tell more stories of success. Tell more stories where people are alleviating suffering and healing past inequities and elevating joy. So in one of the greatest examples, I'm telling you, I'm pointing that way because it's in Yonkers. And Grayston Bakery was started by Bernie Glassman, who was a Jewish Zen priest with a PhD in rocket science. No kidding. And he said, here's Yonkers, the egregiously poor community in one of the richest counties in America. So Westchester County, one of the richest counties in America, Yonkers, ridden with drugs, prostitution, AIDS epidemic at the time was out of control. So Bernie Glassman said, he moved in with his Zen students. They bought a little place. They said, we're going to start a business. And the reason we're starting this business is we want to provide jobs and opportunity for people who have no option, especially people whose other option might be crime and going to jail, or people who just got out of jail and can't get a job because they were in jail, which is just why they often go back to jail and spend their lifetime incarcerated. He said, we have to address that problem. We're going to do it through business. So he said, what business could we start where it'd be easy to train people in a skill and where there'd always be a benefit or demand for the product that we create? He said, how about a bakery? So they started this bakery. They started baking brownies. And one of the really cool things that happens when you do something like this is others who have also been doing something like this are attracted to it and they want to do business with you. So fortunately, early on, Ben and Jerry tasted some Greyston Bakery brownies and decided we could put this in a bunch of our different ice creams. So all of a sudden, they had a big customer. And now I think they bake about 30,000 pounds of brownies every day. I think there's about 150, 160 people working there. I visited, Raj has visited. It is so inspiring. There's one of the people who, I mean, I defy anybody. I don't care who you are, what background you come from. You hear the gentleman there, Dion Drew, who's a supervisor now, and he tells the story of he was just released from prison, couldn't get a job because he had a criminal record. He was in the car with his friends on the way to do another crime. But he got a message saying, "You're next in line for an interview at Greyston Bakery." He said, "Let me out." Because Greyston says they have a policy called open hiring. You don't have to fill out a resume. You just have to show up, get the training. If you were in jail, whatever your background is, none of our business. Just show up, take the rigorous training, do your job, and there's a place for you. So Dion rose through the ranks, got an apartment. Kids are graduating school. I guess they're older now. This is the story from a while ago already. And he says, "Look, if it wasn't for Greyston, I'd be dead or in jail." Now, multiply that by all the lives that have been touched by Greyston. And also think about, even beyond the people who've gotten to work or their families have benefited directly, people who say, "Oh my God, there's a business meeting real human needs, alleviating suffering, and elevating joy because everybody loves to work there and people love to eat the brownies." Now, what does Greyston do? Yes, they take all their profits and they put it into, they've started out with like providing daycare so that people could work, and providing effectively what in those days was hospice care for AIDS patients, and now providing housing for people and others who work for them, but also others in the community. So they've just reinvested everything in their community, but the everything is real profit because they have a real business. It's not a nonprofit. It's a highly socially conscious, brilliant healing organization. So, part of what Raj and I love to do is tell these stories. Because I got to tell you, I've been involved with conscious capitalism pretty much since the beginning. This has always been my intention. But as Raj and I interviewed the people who are really doing this, as we talked to Daniel Levetsky from Kind Snacks, and we went and talked to the people who started Jaipur Rugs in India, where they've lifted 40,000 women out of lowest caste indentured servitude into effectively being artisanal entrepreneurs and dramatically change their lives and the lives of all their families. And they're wildly more profitable than they were before the man who had this vision and made it come true took this initiative. So as we go deep into these stories, we are so moved, we are so inspired. I mean, I read my own book and I get tears in my eyes because the goodness that we want to tap into, that everybody, I think everybody wants to be part of this. They just don't know it's possible.
Yeah. Hey, Derek, I know we have to. Yeah. I know we have to go.
Yeah.
But can I give the audience one quick thing that to be conscious of, since we're talking conscious capitalism?
Please. And I love this. The only episode we've ever gone long on. So go ahead. You guys have application. So go ahead.
So when we say conscious of the things we need to be conscious of, if you notice, Derek slipped up a few times and he called me JT. And I'm going to give you a very quick story of how that came to be. I'll be 50 years old in September. Back in my early 20s, when I was starting out my career, I was trying to get on people's calendars. I was trying to land appointments, could not break in. And one gentleman was kind enough, white guy, he picked up the phone and he said, "Hey, I got a question for you. How did you get a Black first name and an Irish last name?" And what's funny is I don't know where my last name comes from. My mom got our last name in the orphanage, and to this day, I have no clue where this last name comes from. So on the call, I was excited to find out my last name was Irish. That was the focus for me. But when I hung up, it hit me. Oh, that's why I'm not getting on people's calendars, because they're seeing my first name, JeVon. Well, my full name is JeVon Thomas McCormick. So I made the decision, okay, I'm going to go by JT. The following week, my calendar filled up, got appointments, nailed it. And ever since then, I went by JT McCormick. And then the George Floyd murder happened. And I saw it, and it was disgusting to me what I saw afterwards. A bunch of virtue signaling going on. You had people, we were talking about Blackout Tuesday on social media. What the hell does that do to move the needle for anybody? Blackout Tuesday really, and half the people were only doing it because they didn't want to get called out. Then we were arguing about a syrup bottle. And I'm like, come on. And so what really intrigued me though, was I saw a piece that said that there were 3 Black Fortune 500 CEOs in this country. So I went and looked them all up. Here's their names: Marvin Ellison, Kenneth Frazier, and Roger Ferguson. And as a bonus, the wealthiest Black man in America is named Robert Smith. So 4 very ethnic-free names, if you will. So I looked at that and I said to myself, okay, I'm not a Fortune 500 CEO, but I've made it to the CEO level. Our company has been named the #1 company culture in America by Entrepreneur Magazine. So we've done a few things. So I didn't change my name back to JeVon for me. I actually looked at it and said, well, I built my career on JT, but I'm going to start going by JeVon. And here's why. And this is something that everyone can be conscious of and you can put into play immediately. I changed my name back to JeVon because I wanted every kid in this country that's named Martavius, Rayvante, LaQuanda, Lucretia, maybe one day when you enter the business world, in the workforce, you'll be able to work next to a JeVon and not just a JT. And so the conscious part of this I'd like you all to take away is the next time you interview somebody or you see a resume come in and it says Rayvante at the top, it says Martavius, give that kid a shot, because I promise you, there are people that are throwing that resume away just because of that kid's name at the top of it. And that kid's losing out on reps and an opportunity to at least interview with someone. Give the kid, the guy, the woman, the lady, give them an opportunity.
Well said, JeVon. I really admire your passion, courage, and just your authenticity in every aspect of who you are. It's really an honor to know you, and I'm really appreciative that you blessed us with your time. And Michael, you as well. I know how valuable your time is also, and appreciate your support of me and of LifeGuides. And just again, beautiful human beings. I love both you guys, and I'm really appreciative that you spent the time with us today. So I wish you much success. You know, I'm here to support you. Reach out anytime. And thank you to our audience as well for joining us today. As always, it was an amazing conversation.